Shut up and sit down.
What's happening, guys? This is the Takeover Tuesday show. My name's Carlos Redlick, and I got David Allen on the other side. What's happening, David?
Hey, Carlos. Good to be back for another edition of the Takeover Tuesday podcast, and we have a very special guest today in the form of Brian Kurtz, formerly of Boardroom Inc., and now off on his own, a guy who's hired many copywriters. And for copywriters out there who ask us questions constantly over social media, this is the guy that's going to give some of the best answers because he's hired some of the best, probably the best copywriters. Brian, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm interested in how I can help your audience in terms of how they're looking for new business and things that I used to look for as I did hire a lot of great copywriters over the years.
Right. Well, give us a bit of your background, Brian, for people maybe who aren't as familiar as Carlos and I are of your past.
Yeah, it's funny. Someone said to me recently on a podcast, they said, it sounds like you're really famous, Brian, but I don't think anybody on our audience knows who the heck you are. So, I'm a little under the radar only because, I came out of an offline environment at Boardroom, and any of the copywriters on this call, whether they're experienced or not, if they're studying swipe files, which they should, actually no shoulds, but I mean, I don't know of any great copywriter that doesn't have a great swipe file of some of the best packages ever written. And many of the best packages ever written were actually written before the internet. So, you've got direct mail, and Boardroom was one of those companies that, like Agora and Phillips and Rodale Press and a few others, that really have some of the classic direct mail packages of all time, that basically the copy platforms and the things that got covered in all of those packages and products are all applicable today for anything that we do online. So my background was I was the guy at Boardroom for 34 years. I started there in 1981, so I'm assuming a lot of the people on this call weren't even born when I started my first day, the day Ronald Reagan was shot in front of the Washington Hilton Hotel. There might be people on this call that don't know who Ronald Reagan is.
You're saying you started your career with a bang, is what you're saying.
I did, and good. You're a good writer, and so Reagan, that was like, people don't even know that he was almost assassinated, not much less that he was the president. So anyway, that was my first day at Boardroom. Kind of grew up in the direct mail world of direct, selling newsletters and books, mostly through direct mail. We had a newsletter called Bottom Line Personal, which got to about 1 million subscribers in print. Actually, when I left, it was still about 400,000, so it's still a pretty good print newsletter. We published a ton of books. We were in every medium. We were in direct mail. We were in direct response TV, radio, print advertising, magazines, newspaper space, inserts, all of that. And then, of course, we created electronic newsletters online. We had a huge email list. We have done, mini launches online. So, an offline online company that when I left, they're moving in some different directions now in e-commerce and things like that. But it was kind of a direct marketing factory of sorts, not a sweatshop by any means, but a factory where everybody who worked there really learned direct response marketing from the ground up. The company was started by a gentleman by the name of Martin Edelston. And in fact, Martin Edelston's first direct mail package to launch the first publication, which was called Boardroom Reports, which was a business newsletter, was actually written by Eugene Schwartz, who wrote the most important book for any copywriter to ever read and own, called Breakthrough Advertising. I was happy to hear, Carlos, that you had 2 copies for yourself. I'm not here to sell anything, but I do have rights to the book, and I do sell it. So at the end of the call, if there are people that want a copy, we can set them up.
Oh, I know so many people that want a copy. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I could arrange to sell it to them a lot less than what they'll find online, because right now it's only like, pirated copies that are online.
Yeah. My buddy was looking for one that was selling for like 300 something bucks, $400, and he was like, "Damn, I almost bought it." I was like, "Really? Damn, I got
No,
one
I sell it for
by
95.
$9."
You won't find it for less. And I'm not looking to sell anything. I'm trying to get the book out, and I'm actually going to do a course at some point because Gene Schwartz was a mentor of mine and someone who I really want to get spread the word. And a lot of young copywriters are all over it. So anyway, that's kind of like my heritage. I, probably was responsible for mailing. I did some calculation. It's not that accurate, but it was something like 1.3 billion with a B pieces of direct mail over like a 20-year period. So I'm probably
It's a lot of mail.
responsible for about 2 billion pieces. And then of course millions and millions, actually hundreds of millions of email and inserts and space ads. So, it's just been a direct marketing ride. I mean, I've just loved what I've done. So after leaving Boardroom, I started doing a lot more coaching. I've done some events. I have a mastermind group. I'm doing classes. I'm going to do courses. I'm writing a book. And so right now it's sort of like sharing what I learned over 35 years for the next 35 years. And so that's why I usually say yes to most podcasts, because I never know in different audiences what I might be able to share that would be helpful. And it sounded like your audience is an audience that could be helped by some of the stuff I could share today. I don't know if there's any more detail you want on that.
Yeah, you've got so much experiences, and we're probably going to touch on a few different things, but I know we've got a bunch of copywriters that are, some of them are new, some of them are experienced, but they still listen to this. And I'd love to hear kind of the process that you went through, not just to hire people, but what is that you really look for? What is that you look at that's like, okay, this person's, possibly an A-level copywriter versus this person's probably shitty or whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, one of the things we could give to your folks after this interview, we can give them a link to a blog post. Not the most recent. I did a recent one called "The Next $1 Million Copywriter," which is what I think is the new paradigm for copywriters. But
Yes.
there was another post that I did that I referred to in that post. It was called "Show Don't Tell," and what I did in "Show Don't Tell" is kind of took what I spoke at. I spoke at an AWAI conference, which is the American Writers and Artists Inc., which is a kind of a copywriter training ground that a lot of folks on this call probably know, down in Delray Beach, Florida. And I did a keynote speech there that they wanted me to do a speech that basically were like the 7 things that I look for in a copywriter if they want to write for someone like Boardroom in our heyday. And I'm not going to be able to rattle off the 7, but I definitely could tell you what the bulk of that was, and then I can send you a link to that blog post if you like. But basically, what I talked about there were a bunch of things. The things that I look for were, first of all, I needed to get a sense that they had put in what I call the 10,000 hours. Those of you who've read Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, he talks about, that you need 10,000 hours, not just to be an expert, but to be a phenom in anything. Now, some people disagree with that, and whether it's 10,000, 5,000, or 7,600, I don't know what the hell the number is. You clearly have to put in the work. And so I try to get a sense when I'm talking to a new writer is I want to kind of find out practice isn't the thing you do once you're good. It's the thing you do that makes you good. And so I want to get a sense from that copywriter what they've done on the battlefield, what they've done to put in those hours. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I've written for this client or that client. I mean, that's important, and I'll get to that later. But I really want to get a sense of what their journey has been about, what they've done to learn the craft. To that end, I also talk a lot about, how they've specialized. So I'm much more interested in a copywriter who comes to me and says, instead of saying, you have a health product, I can write for that. You have a financial product, I can write for that. You have a product on writing to dentists, I can write for that. To me, that is a warning sign that they're probably, a generalist, and they're trying to be the master of everything, which means they're the master of nothing. And so what I really try to do is find out what they've done their specialization in. I remember when I did an infomercial with Arthur Johnson, who was a world-class copywriter. I remember when I put him on screen, he was in the infomercial as the person being interviewed by newsman's Hugh Downs. And underneath his name, it said Arthur Johnson health writer and publisher. And I didn't lose a minute of sleep by calling a direct response copywriter a medical writer and editor, because I knew that Arthur had taken the deep dives necessary in those specialized areas, that he was more of a specialist in the health topics that were in this book than any doctor I could have put on screen. So
Right.
the idea of being specialized, basically every great writer I've ever met went niche before they went broad, I guess is what I'm really trying to say, not the other way around. And I think that a great writer who comes to me, who wants to write for me and says, I became an expert in X, like I became an expert in chiropractic, I became an expert in pain management, I became an expert in bonds, I became an expert in, you name it. I branched out after I just, kind of crushed it and nailed that particular category. Even if that category was totally irrelevant to what they were going to do for me, it showed me that they had the ability to take that deep dive, which is something that every great copywriter needs to have. Another thing is the power of reading. How much does the copywriter read? And that involves both reading Breakthrough Advertising and Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins and Tested Advertising Methods by John Caples and David Ogilvy and Robert Collier's Letter book, and even the new books today like Ask by Ryan Levesque or Launch by Jeff Walker. I want to know what they're reading, what they read. But what's interesting, and I learned this over the years, that I always thought it all had to be nonfiction and books on copywriting and marketing. And what I learned from the great copywriters like Gene Schwartz and David Deutsch, Paris Lampropoulos, Gary Bencivenga, I learned from them that you really want to read fiction and nonfiction. You want to be well read in a wide variety of areas, because having a sense of what makes the consumer tick in your area has a lot to do with what's going on in the world, what's going on in current events. And I learned this more from Gene Schwartz than anybody else. It was sort of not just the power of specialization, but the power of reading, how well read they were. I talk about a story that I talk about a lot, was when Paris Lampropoulos was going to write a package for me for a natural health newsletter. He didn't really want to do it because he didn't think the newsletter was edgy enough. He didn't think the newsletter had stuff in it that he could really sink his teeth into as a copywriter. So he on his own said, let me talk to the guru, the doctor behind the newsletter. And in that interview that Paris had with him, he found out that there was all this stuff that was like, I'll call it on the cutting room floor, like the edgiest stuff. And so the reason why Paris knew there had to be more stuff is that he was so well read in naturopathic health that he realized there had to be more. And when he found out that there was all this stuff that we weren't putting in the newsletter that would have been really good material for him to write copy around, he got our editors to go get backup on the stuff that they killed for the newsletter so that we could add it into the newsletter, and then he could actually write edgier copy. So that was a really, really big revelation for me about what makes a great copywriter. It's not just what you get handed by the client, but what the client didn't give you that they could have given you that you could write deeper on. I also think that, Paris is also a good example of somebody who has taken deep dives in specific areas. I remember when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, after my call with my urologist, I called Paris because I knew that he had done so much promotion on prostate alternative remedies for prostate and prostate cancer and prostate enlargement. I didn't have prostate enlargement, but he just knew that he knew everything about prostate because he had done those deep dives. I also want to know if the copywriter spends a lot of time with other copywriters. Do they spend a lot of time in groups where they're masterminding and they're getting their copy chiefed by other people? You can't write copy by committee. We know that. So you got to go into your cave. You got to write the copy. But then after you're done, who are you running it by? Who's giving you the feedback, the advice? I want to know the copywriter is coming to me with stuff that has been through the ringer, as it were. It's the old story about, Henry Kissinger, the old Secretary of State, that he had a junior staff member who was writing a speech for him, came and wrote a speech. Dr. Kissinger, here's my speech. And he says, well, that's not good enough. Go back and write it again. Comes back, Dr. Kissinger, here's the speech, go back and write it again. Here's the speech, Dr. Kissinger, go back and write it again. The 8th time, the guy comes and the Kissinger says, go back and write it again. The guy says, Dr. Kissinger, I've done it 8 times. It's the best I can do. I worked so hard. I checked it through all my sources. I ran it by all my cohorts, blah, 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 blah. I really can't do any better. To which Henry Kissinger said, okay, good. Now I'll read it.
Right.
So, who are you running that by? Who are you, and then I also want to know, like, what battlefields are you performing on? Are you getting control packages for the local Toyota dealer, or have you gotten control packages or new promotions when you went in a very competitive environment against other great writers? So, I mean, that's for the more advanced copywriter, but still, like, what pools are you swimming in?
It almost sounds like you want to know how committed they are. Is that right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want somebody who's read the myth and read the stories about I'm going to be a direct response copywriter and then, live on my royalties on the south of France. I want someone who is going to be really committed, as you said, but they have to do all of this stuff to get committed. You can't just say I'm committed. So that's why the post that I wrote was called Show, Don't Tell. Don't tell me how committed you are. Show me how committed you are. Hey, I went to, Guatemala to learn about this supplement because I knew that they had the best natural supplements for I'm making it up, but you get the sense. That's commitment, right? Yeah, that's commitment. And then I want, I talked about swipe files before, what are they reading not only in books, but what are they reading in historical documents? What do they know about, the great writers of the past? What do they know about the great packages of the past? What do they know about what makes people tick when they write copy?
It's funny you say that because I was just recently writing for one of my main clients. He's in the opportunity niche, and so I've been doing this for 10 years, so I've got literally drawers and drawers and drawers full of swipes. And I pulled out, I don't know who wrote it. It was an ad from like the 1920s or 1930s, and literally, those bullets that this guy used was just so on point. It's one of the landing pages we're basically using now. We just kind of tweaked it a little and had some stuff here and there. But the fundamentals of what was in those old ads, it's crazy. The way I like to think of it is if it worked in offline ads, and this may not always, translate, but if it worked in offline style ads and direct mail and stuff where you actually had to put like an honest to God stamp on something and it had to respond, or else you had like a 46 cent, there's a lot more shit to it. So if you're able to see copy that was working back then, rather than copy that, you just paid $20 to drive some traffic to, and, you just figured it out. Like, there's just so much more value, I think, in this offline marketing world.
Yeah. I did a blog post that was, how paying postage made me a better marketer. And it's exactly what you just said. We had to be so much more careful about what we sent out. So yeah, you hit it right on the head.
Yeah, it's so funny because I talk to a lot of different copywriters now because they'll just ask, what are different things to boost response? And I'm like, dude, you know what? I figured out that a blue colored signature would boost the response into my direct mail pieces when I was marketing to acupuncturists than if I did something in black. Now, I don't know why. I'm assuming it just looks more real. I don't know. And then I figured out, putting the stamp upside down or putting little shit like this. But I'm like, all these little things came from offline stuff. Maybe what you guys could do is just fucking send out 1,000 direct mail pieces, see if your shit converts. And if it doesn't work, now you know what you need to work on,
Yeah, no, the beauty of email is that you can, test, but I think that it's interesting that people are just, so adverse to multi-channel marketing, to working an offline business into an online business, which I think most people should do, or at least look at. And, going back to your point about, great copy, if you look at copy platforms from the past, I know a guy who in Brazil, in Portuguese, did a subject line that said, do you make these mistakes in internet marketing? And there's a line from 1923 written by Max Sackheim, which was for a language program that said, do you make these mistakes in English? And so, that's a bit of almost a steal, but that's a legitimate swipe, and that's a very simple example. But as you said, coming up with variations on bullets that are tested, the idea of we had the 10-cent cholesterol cure. You could fill in the blanks on so many things in health that would work for that. We had a package, that was called, it was protecting people from people in their life, and it was called 12 Smiling Swindlers. It was for consumers, and the 12 Smiling Swindlers were your lawyer, your accountant, your doctor, like who's ripping you off. And think about that, being the watchdog bloodhound is a concept that every copywriter could use if they're not working with a guru, but they're working with someone who's kind of going to be a gatekeeper of sorts to protect them. And the idea that what so and so doesn't want you to know, or what your accountant doesn't want you to know, that could be flipped into so many different industries. So yeah, you're hitting on something that's really, really important, and it's not stealing. Stealing is a felony. Stealing smart is an art.
Right. Well, I was reading something the other day that Ken McCarthy had. I think he just gave away free on his site, which was by a guy named Louis Gunther, I believe, which was a direct mail thing called How to Make Money or Sell in Direct Mail or something was the name of the book.
No, Ken said, Jay Abraham just shared something online from a classic book on direct mail by Dick Benson, which I gave him the stuff. It was a classic package written about, a special trip to the North Pole. It was a classic letter from, I think, the 1950s or 40s. I don't know, National Geographic, I think. And, there's Jay Abraham sharing that with an audience that, is all internet all the time. So, this idea that, great copy platforms and great ideas are not universal and you can't find them anywhere is just, it's sick that people just do the same thing over and over again online. How many more times can you say, the sneaky little trick, right? So
that is so true. Yeah, what I like to do is go through those old ones if I can find the swipes of and just write down the formula, not so much the actual bullet or the actual headline, but just there's a rhythm and stuff to that.
Well, when I did a big event in 2014 called the Titans of Direct Response, and some of the giveaways were actually the best giveaways, I think, were swipe files of like the 30 best direct mail packages Boardroom ever wrote, both in PDF and in digital. And I also gave away a swipe file that Dan Kennedy, who was one of my speakers, created for the event, which are also swipes from all the stuff, that he did. So, I think that just so many just incredible things that are available to us that we don't take advantage of.
I agree. I have your DVDs, and they're spectacular. Any copywriter out there that hasn't invested in that, perhaps, or is thinking about it, should go ahead, because there was so
I got to
many
tell you, seriously, I'm not doing a scarcity play. I'm down, I'm down to like the last 30 packages of those Titans. It's the 12 DVDs of the 2-day event, which was Kennedy and Ben Savenga and Deutsch and Lampropoulos and Ken McCarthy and Jay Abraham and Joe Sugarman and Perry Marshall and Greg Renker. The speakers were just off the charts. And so it's a 2-day event. And then, as you said, I've got swipes of all the best packages. I've got interviews with Ken McCarthy's famous Ben Savenga interviews with Gary Ben Savenga, the best writer alive. And all of that's in that package. But I think I only have about 30 left. I'm done selling it right now. So, I mean, if anybody on this list to be interested, we'll give them information on that if you want.
Sounds great. Not to stray too far, but my favorite two parts were, I think, the Dan Kennedy presentation about sort of like the darker side.
Right. The dark arts, right?
Yeah, the dark arts, and the Greg Renker about sort of how, for lack of a better term, how few, things worked, but when they did, really went sky high.
Yeah, that was interesting. 200, how many hundreds of infomercials don't work. But just so you know, so your listeners know, Greg Renker is the partner in Duffy Renker, a $1.8 billion company. That's the number one infomercial company. But the interesting thing in that interview as well was, going back to copy, is that Greg talked about how he scripted those infomercials. And he is a student of direct response copy. In fact, Dan Kennedy is a consultant to Guthrie Ranker. You don't think of Dan Kennedy as a TV guy, but Dan Kennedy is writing scripts. And, in fact, one of the things in that interview, if you recall, we were talking about a specific infomercial. I think it was with
Cindy
Cindy
Crawford.
Crawford.
Yeah.
It was for her skincare product, and the script of that is ingenious. It's like, there's this doctor in Paris that has this secret ingredient. It was all true. Came up with a secret ingredient, and that in the infomercial, like the camera goes down this like back alley in Paris to go to this guy's office where you have to get an appointment months in advance, blah, 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 blah. It was all true, but talk about the suspense of the script, right? And that was TV. So don't underestimate that TV doesn't have a script and doesn't have copy that can be compelling the same way that direct mail or email copy can. And that to me was another big takeaway from the Greg Ranker presentation.
Absolutely. Any copywriter should be interested in watching and listening to those DVDs because they're a gold mine.
Yeah, they are. They're fantastic.
There's a lot of copy. Yeah, one of the things that I kind of wanted to hear your point of view on was there's a lot of copy that, for me at least, when I do a lot of research, I don't get any writer's block. I just kind of flow, you know what I mean? But it just takes me going and doing a bunch of research. Is there anything that either you've done yourself or maybe you've just seen other copywriters do that's kind of a really badass research technique? Is there anything that kind of sticks out in your mind?
Not being a copywriter myself, because I don't have the discipline to write something soup to nuts. I mean, I think I can recognize it's like pornography. I know it when I see it. Like I know a good package when I see it. And I'm a pretty good evaluator of copy, but I don't see myself as a copywriter. But I write I write a blog and I like writing. Even when I'm writing a blog and I want to do some research, I realize that without the research, it's just not as powerful. So take that and put it on steroids for the direct response copywriter. I don't know if I have a technique per se. All I can tell you is that the best copywriters spend way more time researching than writing, at least for the big chunk of time in advance of before they put the first piece of copy on the write the first copy on the paper, and so or on the computer. So I think one of the things that was kind of a revelation to me recently is I was talking to a world-class direct marketing company. They do almost everything online, but they used to also be in direct mail. They are, I won't name them, but they're probably, one of the top, 2 or 3 in their category. They were talking about how they hire copywriters for internal jobs, like the internal copy team. And basically, if they hire someone entry level or a little bit above, most of those people spend 2 years, up to 2 years, just in their research department without writing any copy. They're really not going to let them write copy. And they just make them research like crazy. The other thing that I would say, and they teach it the way they teach it. I don't have the techniques that they teach, so I'm not answering that part of the question. But all I can tell you, just to give you the emphasis, that for someone that wants to be an aspiring copywriter in a world-class organization in direct response, they don't get to write copy for 2 years, and it's all research. The other thing I'll tell you is that there are copywriters who have like small groups of what they call copy cubs, people they're training in groups. And I know for a fact that one of them basically teaches what he calls bullet writing before they do anything. So they don't even write headlines. They don't write write body copy. They don't come up with the big idea. Basically what they do is he gives his copy cubs a big chunk of content, whether it's a book, whether it's a big chunk of things to look at, and makes them just write bullets, like compelling bullets with page numbers, or, it's a Gene Schwartz technique, what never eat on an airplane, page 47, how to outwit a mugger in a self-service elevator, page 690. I mean, those are the kinds of things we did in our direct mail, and teaching young copywriters how to write bullets, how to write what we call fascinations that compel the reader to keep reading to the next fascination is the kind of thing that I think any young copywriter needs to learn. So again, not a technique, because I'm not a teacher of copy, but I know the emphasis that's put on research, and I know the emphasis that's put on bullet writing before you write the full blown, you know, great American novel slash promotion.
Right.
Now, Brian, because you've hired so many great copywriters and the best of the best, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the client side of dealing with copywriters, because we have a lot of copywriters on this show already. We've had guys like Chris Haddad and so forth on here talking about the copywriter side, and so we all have similar frustrations with clients, I think, which we talk about offline and then sometimes on this show. But maybe talk about the client side of things and dealing with these weird people, copywriters.
Well, I think the copywriters, I mean, not someone who's like Haddad, but
Right.
I think, someone who's got like a lot of chops, certainly wants to make sure that they're dealing with a true professional on the client side. Even though I didn't have somebody on my team that was a copywriter per se, I had great creative team that really understood how to edit copy. Marty Edelston, our founder, and myself, we were very good at headlines. We were very good at giving feedback to the copywriter. But look, I don't think a great copywriter should suffer fools gladly, so that they don't want to work with clients that there's nobody over at the client side that knows what the hell they're doing, because that's going to frustrate the hell out of you. But I will give you the other side, that I think a lot of copywriters get too big for their britches very quickly, and they think they know a lot more than they do very quickly. They let their ego get in the way. One of the things I didn't mention when I started listing all those things that I look for in a copywriter: specialization, what they read, who they hang around with. One of the things was humility. And it's very hard, for a copywriter to be that humble when they've had some success. But you know what? Suck it up, man. You're only as good as your next control. And so, I'm not saying that you have to sit there and say, poor me, don't play victim. You want to be bold, right? You want to say, I love my copy, I stick by it. But, have a little humility, have a little, especially if you're dealing, choose your clients wisely. Don't go to clients that are just going to frustrate you because they don't know what the hell they're doing. Now, you'll make money on those clients, because, what about the client that doesn't understand what you've written? And so they're going to just accept that whatever you send them, you'll probably beat whatever they have because it sucks. And so therefore, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel, and you'll make some money. That's one way to go. But then if you want to, swim in a pool with, other people who are just world class, both as copywriters and the client is world class, suck it up, man. Have a little humility, know that the client knows what the hell they're doing because they've been around for a long time. So I guess what I'm saying is that as a copywriter, as they're dealing with clients, you want to adjust based on what the expertise of the client is. And if you're in doubt, go humble as opposed to, being a dick. And so, I think that it's always better. Look, they know you're good. They hired you. They paid you a fee. They know you've got a track record. They went through a process to hire you as a copywriter. They didn't do that because they think you're a total amateur. Don't act like an amateur when the first time they tell you they don't like a headline, you start telling them, you start yelling and screaming or throw a tantrum. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to be a wallflower either. There's a balance there. But on the client side, we were a pretty sophisticated client, but we weren't the best. There were clients that these world-class copywriters work with that actually had people who they were working with on the staffs that were probably more seasoned on the copy than we were at Boardroom. But, they knew that we had a track record. They knew that our opinions counted. And even if they disagreed, there's a way to disagree. And the best copywriters I know would disagree, but they would disagree in a way that was very
appreciative.
It was collaborative. There's a way to do it. And, and if in doubt, if I'm dealing with a world-class copywriter and you get to an impasse, it's my way or the highway, I would just do another panel. I test their version versus the one that I want to do it that way because you trust each other. So that's a very important thing when you're dealing, with clients as well.
No, I was going to say that leads probably right into the sort of your next $1 million copywriter blog post, which you think there's a paradigm shift occurring where copywriters are going to work with one client going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's one, it might be a few,
Right.
but again, it's consistent with everything I talked about in terms of going narrow, going niche before you go broad. But even, I mean, and once you go broad and you're really good at a lot of things, it's probably tough to not stay broad because you're good at everything. But, you know, I think I said in my blog post, a little tongue in cheek, you know, I use Jim Rutz as an example, who's one of the best copywriters who ever lived. I said, if you're in the next Jim Rutz, ignore everything I just told you, and please give me a call. But if you're not, you know, because Jim could write about anything. But I think the idea that you're taking deep dives, you're becoming a specialist before you become a generalist, and then once you become the specialist, why wouldn't, like I had a guy write to me the other day about that blog post, and he was specifically telling me that he was an expert in adolescent psychology, I think, or something. It was very, very specific. And so I said to him, awesome. What I think you should do is, since you're going to be the most passionate copywriter when writing about issues that deal with, you know, adolescent, you know, abnormal behavior, and from a psychiatry standpoint, try to find who the biggest either hospitals, companies, anything to do with that category. The odds are that they're totally undermarketed. They probably don't even know they need a copywriter. They probably won't pay you the big bucks to start, but start slow. But if you're writing in a passion, I mean, this isn't like, you know, perfect advice, but why wouldn't you want to take a deep dive? And if you could find somebody that actually wants to expand their marketing efforts and they're in your sweet spot, and you become their copywriter of record in that area, I think that's a much better place to be than trying to be a hired gun, trying to make money going
Diversifying it.
client to client, and trying to, you know, not be able to keep a control, not be able to make a lot of money with a lot of clients, but make a lot of money with one. You know, and then, you know, maybe at some point you do want to become a full-time employee. And again, I hate saying that only because a lot of the freelance copywriters chose copywriting because they don't want to work for the man. They don't want to be part of an organization. But, you know, you can still be kind of what I call intrapreneurial. One of my blog posts was from intrapreneur to entrepreneur. But being an intrapreneur is sometimes equally satisfying if you're doing what you love. And so, you know, it's an ongoing conversation. I mean, I think that blog post, I mean, we definitely should direct people, I guess, to these blog posts because I think it'd be useful for them to read. And then I think that my next blog post this Sunday will be a link to a podcast I did with Kevin Rogers, who runs something called Copy Chief. It's a membership program for copywriters. And so we're continuing the conversation in a podcast this Sunday. And then, or actually, I don't know when this is going to be released. So it's probably, this is going to be released maybe after that's released, but we can get a link. We're probably going to do a live webinar on the topic because I think that there is a paradigm shift. And I think that, you know, being able to match great copywriters in niches with the people in the niche is going to be the wave of the future, I think.
I agree.
Sounds
I
great.
agree so much with you because it's kind of the path that I've semi-stumbled upon because I've been writing, you know, I was doing a bunch of, I guess, freelance work where I was writing for a bunch of different clients. And then what I've discovered is I ended up doing a lot better work and just felt great working with 2 retainer clients where I get a percentage and royalty still, but I'm on a retainer with them. So I'm just their go-to copywriter. I just crank out all their shit and all this stuff. So I'm a contractor, but it's kind of like you still get that steady flow income. So you're not having to chase around, you know, millions of other projects or anything. And you can really focus on getting, you know, really damn good and getting the royalties coming afterwards.
Exactly.
So I think that's huge. That's huge. And you also did something I kind of wanted to point out also that you mentioned. I like to call it showing appreciation because a lot of the things that helped me separate myself when I stopped writing for myself, I used to own a couple of gyms and I owned a website company and I sold that off and realized I really hate managing a business and doing all this stuff. I really just like the selling and the closing and the writing part. That's really what I like to do. So
Yep.
that's kind of why I started writing for other people and doing all this stuff. But one of the things that I discovered is exactly what you said. There's so many copywriters out there that may get one hit. They may not even get a real hit, you know what I mean? And they just get so big and they just get very cocky and almost assholey on the phone. And the biggest thing that I did to stand out, especially in the beginning, because I was like, okay, well, I can write well. I know because I've built my own businesses, but, no one knows me. So I just started showing appreciation for everything. So let's say, somebody would message me on Facebook asking me if I could help them with a video sales letter. I would just say something along the lines of, hey, man, I really appreciate you, reaching out to me and looking to get the video sales letter done. Let's see if I can help you out. Let's hop on a quick call. And if I'm not the best fit, no worries. I know like hundreds of copywriters I can introduce you to. And then that was so simple. And then when they get on the call, hey, I really appreciate you being on the call, because there's such a lack of that. And I kind of like to think of it like old school, I don't know, I'm going to date, 1920s, but it's really bullshit. It's, just old school work ethic and old school kind of, shake the person's hand and you have some sort of respect and honor and you get the work done. Now, obviously, you sign your agreements, you do all that stuff. But if you can combine, I think, that old school behavior and that old school work ethic and get it with the new school kind of technology and stuff, man, you're just so ahead of the game because there's such a difference between them now.
Yeah, I'm, bravo. I'm 100% agree.
All right. Well, my life is done.
So, Brian, maybe tell us about, I'm sure you have some events upcoming. Of course, you talked about breakthrough advertising book you'd like to offer people and the DVDs that you have left. Maybe just reiterate some of the stuff you have.
Yeah. So, the main thing, I'd love people on your list to follow me and follow my blogs and follow my writing, because I think I'm writing about stuff that's of really good use to them. And I learn a lot because I encourage people to email me off the blog where I can then respond to them, and which is good because I get into these dialogues. That's how I got to the podcast with Kevin Rogers. And it's also how we're going to do this webinar. And I think I can also bring the best of your copywriters. I could find them clients down the road. Not that I want to be a headhunter. That's not my job. But I think I'm matching up people is very important to me. And I'm very interested in finding the next generation of great copywriters. So I have a site. It's www.briankurtz, BrianKurtz.me, briankurtz.me. Clearly, I built my website before I secured my briankurtz.com name, so that was kind of stupid.
Yeah, I think there was a realtor that with your website.
Yeah, I need to. I have to try. But I own briankurtz.me. It's good stuff. So briankurtz.me, there's a lot of free content on that site. They can sign up for my blog. There's free interviews, all kinds of stuff. If they want to go to the blog page, briankurtz.me/blog, I would then go there and you can do a search on, the next $1 million copywriter is a post that I think folks here would want to read. I think the post that I did called Show, Don't Tell is one that they want to read. And From Intrapreneur to Entrepreneur is one that they want to read. And there's a search bar in there and you can just, search. And I've got like 2 years worth of blogs in there. And, by all means, feel free to have your folks go in there. If they're interested in purchasing the Titans DVD package, which I said I don't have a lot left, and that's the 12 DVDs, the swipe files, all that stuff, they could go to www.titansdvds.com. So it's Titans, Titans, DVDs.com. Or they can just email me at brian@briankurtz.me. Brian@briankurtz.me, and I can, give them information on that. And if they're interested in copies of Breakthrough Advertising, which is the most important book ever written on copy, creative, human behavior, send me an email at brian@briankurtz.me, and I will give them information on how to, send me a PayPal for the book, and I'll send them a copy. I also have limited supply of these, but I have 4 discs of interviews with different greats like Ken McCarthy and Jay Abraham and Marty Edelston and David Deutsch and Yannick Silver and a bunch of great people about breakthrough advertising and how they use the book. It's 4 CD interviews plus a DVD of Gene Schwartz himself presenting at Rodale Press. If you guys have the DVD package already, in the big DVD Titans package, there's one of those CDs and the DVD of Gene and a transcript of that of the interview. But the box set of the 4 CDs and the DVD I could sell with the book for a pretty good price. So anyway, so Brian at briankurtz.me is the email. You know, briankurtz.me, www.briankurtz.me is the site for free content. Sign up for my blog. briankurtz.me/blog is the blog. And then www.titansdvds.com if they want to look at the package from the Epic event in 2014, or they can email me about that as well.
Well, thanks a lot, Brian. I think you've done great service for all the people listening here today, copywriters and just general business owners, perhaps looking to hire copywriters or involve themselves with copywriters. Carlos, you have any closing statements you'd like to say?
Yeah, man. Hey, I really appreciate you being on the call. Like I was saying, I don't know if we were recording this or if this was before, but I watched Brian speak at the last systems seminar years ago. I don't remember how long it was, but it was unbelievable. Really great guy. Obviously has tons of information, loads of great value to learn from. So make sure you go follow all his stuff. If you haven't gotten a chance to get breakthrough advertising, you've got to get that. That's just
that's crucial. That is crucial. Thanks a lot, Brian, for coming on, man. Real pleasure.
Oh, I really appreciate it, and good luck with all you're working on, and I'm sure our paths will cross again soon.
Absolutely. We'd also like to thank Ben Sound at bensound.com for the intro and outro music, and we'll be back next week with another exciting guest. Awesome.